customer adoption. And when it comes to this topic in the B2B e-commerce world, there is one voice on LinkedIn that you need to be following: Carlos Camacho. Carlos Camacho is a seasoned e-commerce leader. He's got over 18 years of experience. He's driven digital transformation, and he's expanded global commerce capabilities. He's led multi-million-dollar transformations, modernized enterprise platforms, and he's optimized customer experiences around the world. Customer adoption, why is it such a big topic today?
Right now, it's a race. It's a race between all companies to get their customers to start transacting online with them. It's all about how fast can you get those customers to adopt. Very early adopters, like news that's coming from those companies, they'll print something like 70% of all of our sales now going through e-commerce. And you look at their competitors and it's like 30%. That's massive. I would say trust your people. Hire the best people possible. If your future customer is going to demand a digital first experience, a self-service experience, then you have to move them onto your digital ecosystem as quickly as possible to hold on to them, because your best customer is your current customer. It's more difficult to find a new customer, more expensive to find a new customer.
So if there's one topic that I could talk about all day long, it's customer adoption. And when it comes to this topic in the B2B e-commerce world, there is one voice on LinkedIn that you need to be following: Carlos Camacho. I've been watching Carlos for years, literally. I remember when he first started sharing his thoughts online, and I've seen him grow into one of the most insightful and generous thought leaders in our space. He's the kind of person who doesn't just do the work. He shares the how and the why behind it, helping the entire industry move forward. Carlos Camacho is a seasoned e-commerce leader. He's got over 18 years of experience. He's driven digital transformation, and he's expanded global commerce capabilities. He's led multi-million-dollar transformations, modernized enterprise platforms, and he's optimized customer experiences around the world. Whether it's PIM, Agile, or omni-channel strategies, especially in the world of customer adoption, Carlos brings a deep well of practical expertise. Today, Carlos serves as the global commerce lead at Bausch Lomb, and I'm proud to welcome him as our very first practitioner guest on the show. I hope you enjoy it. Your path to this world of B2B e-commerce is pretty interesting. I just want to hear a little bit about how you ended up in this world.
Yeah, I never expected it, really. Originally, I went to school to become a computer science major. And then I took a marketing class, and I fell in love with marketing. So I ended up majoring in marketing and minoring in computer science. In my second year, I had an opportunity to go to Japan and do an internship there. And that really I caught the bug for international experiences. So when I graduated, here I am with marketing and computer science degree. Eventually, I find my way back to Japan. I worked there for several years for the government of Japan. And then eventually the company I did an internship with called me up and said they were working on a project and they wanted to hire me. And this was like in the mid 90s, late 90s. And the project was like an IoT type of project. And I mean, it wasn't called IoT back then,
Right?
like remote control of devices. Pretty advanced, but it was like a great idea, but looking for looking for a great application, you know what I mean? So eventually I got into mobile web design because I think Japan had a real head start in mobile technology. Like I would come back to the States and Americans were still using WAP on their small little phones, and Japan had this technology called iMode. So a lot of digital experiences were mobile in Japan. So I got into that for a bit. And then eventually, 14 years had somehow passed by. And my wife, who's Japanese, said, maybe it's time for us to go and live in America. So came back to the States, wasn't sure what I was going to do. and I saw a position for e-commerce, and I was like, oh, e-commerce, I'm kind of vaguely familiar with that. And so I applied and was hired for a smallish company that did a lot of their business through print catalogs. And,
Mm.
in those days, you print out a catalog 300 pages. As soon as you're done printing it, it's already,
Out of date.
out of date. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, to generate those catalogs was just so much effort. And, I could remember the design team manually changing the prices every time the catalog needed to be updated, an insane amount of work. So they had launched an e-commerce site and it started getting traction. And so we added a few more sites for different industries. And that went pretty well for many years. I
Was that
had
a B
a,
to B2C company or a B2B?
yeah, it was kind of mixed. Yeah, mostly it was businesses that were purchasing from them, but we did have a lot of just hobbyists that were also buying. They were selling products for agricultural sector and growing sector, like greenhouse owners and stuff like that.
Mm.
So it was kind of a nice blend, I think. You could wear B2B hat some days, and then some days you were doing a lot of, marketing campaigns, working a lot of SEO and advertisements and so forth. But I think what made it great was that I had a fantastic mentor to start off with, someone who really understood e-commerce. He had a background in retail, and actually, I had a background in retail. And so, kind of go full circle, thinking about computer science and marketing. To me, that's the blend right there for someone who's in
Hmm.
e-commerce. Because, as you know, you're, in the morning, you may be doing something very technical oriented, and then towards the afternoon, you might be doing something more on the marketing or creative side. And that's e-commerce. And that's, I think, why I love e-commerce. It's just that, every day can be different. And of course, there are some folks that really hyper specialize, on analytics or on the creative process, et cetera, or the development side. But for me, I've always enjoyed kind of that middle spot. So that's how I got into e-commerce, and I guess I was good at it because I had, that background, also background in design, background in how to sell.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of younger folks may not have that background because
Hmm.
retail, brick and mortar is kind of dying out, not completely, but I think for our generation, probably when we were younger, we worked in retail. And if you think about retail, every time an advertisement went out there and a customer would come in, we had our, cross sells, we had our upsells, we had, merchandising. We needed to know all the product information. We had to have a really smooth checkout process up at the front of the store. So what does that mean? That is e-commerce 101, dealing with customer service and so forth.
Hmm.
So having that background, I think, gave me an edge as well. So eventually, I found my way into the medical industry, medical supplies, working for a large distributor, moving up to a bigger website in terms of sales and also a larger team. And that was interesting because you're now working with people who are really specialized in different areas like onboarding customers or working with product information or UI UX design. So I quite liked having a team that was specialized. Then I felt that up until that point, the companies I was working for were, uh, focused on North America, and I was really interested to get into e-commerce on a global level. So I moved my family to the next state over to Massachusetts suddenly, and I was there for a few years working for a global company. And that, of course, brought different type of challenges with working with different type of cultures, temperaments, but building collaboration across vast distances, and but also dealing with often every region or country could potentially have its own platform. So there you're dealing with, well, how do I standardize not only workflows and processes and product data, but also how do I standardize e-commerce platforms so I don't have a 10-headed monster that I have to deal with. And eventually, I moved on and I went back to working into kind of like an industrial type of sector and got really heavily involved in kind of the UI UX side of things, the customer experience side of things. And now I find myself back into, I guess, the medical slash pharma world. So I seem to be bouncing back and forth between like a distributor and a manufacturer, which is, as you know, very interesting. It has different types of challenges. But now working for a manufacturer, a global manufacturer, and I love it. Working with colleagues over the world, around the world, and every day is a different challenge. So that was my journey.
I'm interested, Carlos. You and I have had the benefit of the years of learning. Right. So, I learned manufacturing and distribution over, I started in ERP. So I just got, I spent years doing this and then years studying e-commerce, then years in B2B commerce. But when you add all that up, I mean, it's like literally took me 20, 25 years to actually gain the knowledge, like not the wisdom.
Right.
The wisdom should come over time. It's just
we still make mistakes once in a while.
Sure. Yeah. For the new VP of e-commerce that's at a $750 million distributor or $750 million manufacturer that maybe knows e-commerce from the kind of B2C world, but now coming into this kind of complex world, what's your any piece of advice for that new guy as he's coming into his position?
Yeah, I would say trust your people. Hire the best people possible, and trust that the people that you have working underneath you are gonna hit the metrics that you set out for them. So that's important. It's important to really support them, and the way you support them is to help them, help the company build like synergy across the entire enterprise. So what I mean by that is we can't see e-commerce as just an e-commerce thing or an IT thing. It needs to be considered as an enterprise-wide platform, and not just from that aspect, but like all of the policies and what we're doing in marketing, what we're doing in finance. It all has to align with what we're trying to do in e-commerce. So building those bridges across those different departments are going to be, to me, really key.
You wrote an article recently. You've written many articles, but one of the ones I like particularly that you've written recently is I think you called it The Great Shift.
Yeah.
The Great Shift in B2B commerce. And you kind of talked about technology as well as kind of a new kind of buyer. Do you want to kind of explain what do you remember that article? Do you have enough to explain what you meant by that?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I have so many articles on LinkedIn that after a while I start forgetting that I even wrote them.
Basically, you talked about the shift. Talked about the shift of millennials and Gen Z, and driving more autonomy, driving more transparency.
Gotcha. Yeah,
what was one?
Yeah, so if you think back originally how we dealt with customers in the B2B world, of course we had that catalog, right? And the salesperson would go and do their field visits, and they would drop off this huge catalog. And then the customers, when they needed to order something, they would look at this catalog, and often there were no, specifications. There's no pictures. I mean, it's really text dense, and they're going to call the salesperson up, which means that the salesperson's not going to be selling, right? They're going to be now an order taker, right?
Yeah.
Or they're going to call customer service and they're going to place their order there, and then they're going to wait for that order. They have no idea. Maybe when they're going to go get it, they're going to call up the company and say, "Where's my order?" et cetera, et cetera. So kind of the old way. And so when we start thinking about this shift towards digital experiences or digital first, that there's this stat out there that says like 80% of B2B purchases start with like a digital experience, right? And then there's another percentage out there that says something like 50% of, younger generation folks, different demographics, they will only buy through like a B2B channel or through a digital experience, right? They'll reject these other channels. And so, what we're seeing now is a shift as a lot of industries, especially industries with, folks that have been in that company for 20 or 30 years, they're kind of reaching the retirement age. But you also have millennials or Gen X, they're now, the bulk of B2B buyers, right? And what type of experience that they're looking for is a digital first experience. And so, as a CEO, where should you be investing your money? I often see that they're still focused on let's hire more salespeople, and that's fine. That's fine to a certain extent. But I think more and more the focus needs to be like, how do we create the best customer experience possible online? Because at some point, the generations are going to be really focused on that channel. And if you're not prepared for that, you're going to be in pretty big trouble. The millennials and Gen Z and so forth, they're typically going online, doing their research. And when they place that order, they don't necessarily need a salesperson to hold their hand. In fact, they prefer self-service. And everywhere I go, there's a lot of people talking about self-service. How do we increase self-service? At a global company, you may have hundreds and hundreds of calls every day. Where's my order? Can I have a copy of my invoice? I lost my packing slip. So think about like all of those calls coming in. Some of those calls are probably going to your salespeople. So, they can't focus on what they should be doing, which is value added activities, selling. Ditto for the customer service, ideally they should be dealing with more complicated issues. So if we can divert those calls over to the e-commerce site or the e-commerce portal, that's going to be a huge win. But I guess the point I'm trying to raise is that it's not a nice to have anymore. It's a must have, because when a millennial wants to return something, they want to go to the website, hit two buttons, and then go to like Whole Foods and drop off the item wherever they're doing it. They want low friction, and they want to make it easy to buy. They want the experience to be very easy to buy. So that's where things are going.
My oldest daughter is a sales engineer at a B2B commerce startup. And in the beginning, I remember, especially as we had breakfast every Thursday and we would talk about our job, and she would ask me lots of questions like, what's an ERP, Dad?
Oh, that's great.
And it's really the reason we built the course we built was like, I knew so many people that didn't understand different aspects of it. So we built this course, and I used a lot of what I worked with her on to build the course. Anyways, so in one of the breakfasts, as we're kind of walking through, what her company did and the problems they solve, she stopped me and she said, Dad, I don't understand why I even have a job. Like, why in this day and age? Like, she was unable to comprehend the history of the companies to bring them here. She, in her head, she was like, everybody does it this way. She was unable to comprehend that a bunch of companies didn't do this way. She's like, Dad, if, Tony's Pizza can text me when they're on the way and they have 4 employees, why is this a thing, right? It's just an interesting, it's such an interesting perspective. And she's in the workforce. She's 25. She's not.
Oh, sure. She's at the start 16, of her career.
Right? She's 25 and she's, moving up the ranks inside of her company. So these are starting to even be influential Gen Z, right?
Do you know what you should do is have her read the article by Andy Hoare, Death of a B2B Salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was a real game changer. And,
Mm.
that article basically said, aren't B2B salespeople going to become like the dodo bird or, the dinosaur and
Yeah.
be extinct, to your daughter's point? And actually, he ended up writing a follow-up to that. And the answer is actually no. They will never go away completely.
Yeah.
But what they should be doing are activities that require things that only really a human could provide, and very consulting type of
Consultative. Yeah.
consultative type of activities, things that are very difficult to reproduce. I mean, you can do guided selling online and you can do CPQ online, but what's and this could change. I mean, 5 years from now, I could be eating my words, but sometimes even if you're doing CPQ online, the customer can, build something that makes really no sense for their needs or
Yeah.
isn't the most efficient product for their needs. And so, yeah, having a person who's been doing it for 20 or 30 years with that institutional knowledge, what could go wrong or what could go right with that product, that's
Mm.
invaluable. I think it's going to be a while until we can replace that. Eventually, we probably will with AI, but not right now. So I think your daughter is quite safe. And by the way, just to prove that, when I once looked at analytics, I looked at, here's a segment of customers who only buy online. Here's another segment that only buys offline. And then I looked at the third segment. That segment buys both online and through their salesperson. And
Mm-hmm.
that segment had the highest average order value.
Highest. Yeah. And
Yeah.
LTV.
Um,
Yeah.
right. So that
100%.
blend is what I try to advocate. And so
Yeah.
when I go into a company, I make it clear to sales field, I'm not here to steal your job. In fact, one of my slides in a presentation, I often show, a guy with machine gun, and saying like, I'm not here to do the death of this B2B salesperson. I'm here to, enable you to help the customer better. But let me funnel, those customers who just want those, laundry lists of products, funnel that over to me, funnel over those questions about where is my order, and we're going to set up win-win relationships.
Yeah. I actually wrote it about a week and a half ago. My hot take, I wrote it just in my notebook.
Yeah.
Haven't published it yet. My hot take is, in a world where
Yeah.
everything is AI generated, in
Yeah.
a world where you don't know what content's real and AI
Mm,
generated, what
mm,
websites are real or
mm,
AI generated, what phone calls are real and AI generated.
mm,
And we can see the world going that way. And it might be
sure.
correct. I'm not talking about incorrect AI information. I'm talking about,
Of
like,
course.
you can just kind of feel it, right? In a
Mm,
world where that's the case,
mhm.
I believe the birth of the salesperson
Oh, yeah.
begins.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
person becomes incredibly important. Events and actual connection become even more critical, not less. And it's a validation. So
Mm,
then we have that kind of three-legged
hmm.
stool,
Hmm.
Carlos, that you talked about, kind
Yep.
of e-commerce and digital. I say AI, and then kind of the e-commerce and digital, and then the actual salespeople and the knowledge workers and the
Right.
people that have that institutional knowledge. Those things working together, and that person actually being the arbiter then of truth, right? To say, yeah, that's actually a great suggestion. Don't have to
Yeah.
go through that whole process and learn all
Sure.
that,
Yeah.
but they can be that arbiter of truth. I see it as I believe we're going to see a evolution of the salesperson that actually takes on and they might not be called sales, right? It might
Mm.
be more
Enablement.
like sales engineers
Yeah.
or,
Stable sales
solution
enablement. I like.
engineers and
Yeah.
stuff like that,
Solutions. Yeah. They're going to be solution
Yeah.
oriented. And I think death of the B2B salesperson is going to be more of death of the B2B order taker salesperson.
Yes,
So,
100%.
if you're just an order taker today, time is ticking. But to your point, if you're a salesperson who understands solutions, and when I say solutions, is how to make your customers' business better.
Hmm.
So, like, a salesperson who doesn't do that is just like, I have product to sell, buy my product. But that other type of salesperson is like, let me understand your business and let me help you help your business. I think
Mm.
that's where they're going to find success.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this leads really nicely into a conversation about customer adoption. I know you've written quite a bit about customer adoption.
Mm.
I don't think there's any one topic that's more important today
It's not.
in 2025
Yeah.
and next year than customer adoption, because the tentacles of customer
Mm.
adoption
Mm.
also reach into a couple other areas that are critically important, like change management and communication and executive
Yeah.
buy-in and alignment. But I'm curious. I'm curious from your perspective, just what you are kind of watching, what's kind of driving customer adoption. Like, why is it such a big topic today, from your perspective?
It, it it's a big it's a big it's a big important topic because, yeah, in fact, I was not long ago I was listening to some words of wisdom from a pretty heavy hitter in the B2B e-commerce world, and basically the gist of what they were saying is right now it's a race. It's a race between all companies to get their customers to start transacting online with them. So, throw everything else out, the noise. It's all about how fast can you get those customers to adopt. Because going back to the earlier point is if the your future customer is going to demand a digital first experience, a self-service experience, if that's where the customer wants to do business with you, then you have to get your customers to move them onto your digital ecosystem
Mm.
as quickly as possible, to capture them, to hold on to them, because your best customer is your current customer, right? It's more difficult to find a new customer, more expensive to find a new customer. So to me, that's why it's important, because if you're not doing that, likely your competitor is really focused on driving their customers online. So,
Mm-hmm.
if you're doing commissions and quotas and whatever policies you're using, whether it be a carrot or a stick, right now you should just be hyper focused on e-commerce adoption.
Mm-hmm. There's I've been working on this piece about the four levers of profitability and how e-commerce
Mm.
ties into profitability. And one of those is that there's no better way to control margin
Mm-hmm.
than digital and data control,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Because in the non-digital, margin fluctuates because you have people saying things like, what you get one-off deals from salespeople, you get different pricing from salespeople, you get
Okay.
mistakes from people. So that margin fluctuates, where in the e-commerce world, you can apply policy that
Mm.
makes sure you're controlling margin. And in addition to that, you can suggest higher margin products, right? Private
Yeah.
label products,
The
or
upsell.
just
Yeah.
higher
Yep.
margin products ahead of things,
Mm-hmm.
Boost and Berry, those
Yes.
types of things. And then of course you're looking at number of order lines, and we
Mm-hmm.
know, just like you said, with a
Mm.
salesperson and digital, that combination of number of order lines and lifetime value, that customer increases significantly.
Right.
And so you have this digital control over margin. We don't typically talk about that. We talk about either
Yeah.
like sales growth. We don't talk about margin percentage
Mm-hmm.
protection and how you
Mm-hmm.
can do that in digital. I just think it's a fascinating thing. It's another reason.
Mm.
It's a reason why digital is so critical, is because you do have more control over
Um,
that.
I see it more of, I, I don't I don't know if it's control is the word that I would use, because when you're in B2B, certainly I'm with you on B2C, but with B2B, we have contracted pricing. And so if you've already established a contracted pricing, typically that's normally runs for a year. And so what they're buying offline price wise is exactly the price you had better be showing them online, because if not, your phone will ring and say, why why is my customer not getting their price? And so the online experience actually needs to mirror whatever the customer's offline contract stipulates. So from that aspect, I really don't have control over the pricing. What I can do, to your point, though, and totally agree with you here, is I can do things like boost and bury. So I can show, if I'm selling 1,000 different gloves
Mm.
from different manufacturers, I can boost those gloves that are more profitable, have a better margin. And in fact, at one of the distributors I worked at, you go to the product detail page and you see, the fancy or the well-known brand, the glove there. And so we have an upsell, here's a better product. We also have a downsell. And I'm not quite sure if that's the right word for it. Until someone tells me a better word to use, I'll use it. But I was calling it a downsell. And basically that was a house brand. But the margin, it was cheaper for the customer to buy it. The quality was still just as good, but as a house brand, it was cheaper, right? But our margin was much better. So those type of activities, or adding recommendations, or exposing, I love this one, is exposing products or categories that the customer is not aware of. Like, how many times in your career, right, where the customer had no idea that we sold something, and they're on the website and they see something, they're like, I didn't even know that you guys sold those. So add to cart. So in that sense, we can drive better gross margin
Yeah.
online. But in terms of controlling the price, that's usually not an area, that a sandbox that I can go into.
Yeah, I mean, 30% of all
Mm.
30% of all transactions, even amongst contract pricing,
Mm.
are one-off pricing deals made by salespeople.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so even when you have completely agree, you should have mirrored contract pricing on the website and
Right.
what the salesperson's telling you. However, what
Mm.
happens so often is like it's a relationship, and so the salesperson gives them a deal. And I'm not saying those deals shouldn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not, because I think that's probably really good for the relationship, and that's between them and their team. However, as much that shifts to digital as possible gives you that ability for that more than anything. What's holding back adoption the most in your opinion?
I don't really think it's one thing. It's just like the flip side of it. What is the secret to e-commerce adoption? There's no silver bullet. You have to do a wide range of activities. On the other side is like, what's holding it back. I could talk about ease of business. So, for example, if a customer, all they have to do is write something on a document and fax that to you or email that to you, or just go into an email and say, I need 3 SKU number, blah, blah, blah. That's about as easy as you can get. But then here you are saying, hey, I've got this great brand new expensive, this expensive e-commerce platform. Please, customer, go and use it. And now the customer's got to go to the site. They've got to register. They've got to search for the product. Maybe they have to, or they use quick order, and they have to add it to the cart and so forth. So you're now saying, customer, I want the work to be put on your shoulders. Whereas when they're sending those faxes in or emails, my customer service person needs to key those in, unless you're using OCR. But that could be a certain amount of users that don't want to come to e-commerce simply because they view that the way that they're ordering today is the fastest way, right? So there's that. I've also run into salespeople who maybe they weren't, in some companies, they weren't getting paid commission on sales that are online, which is the stupidest idea ever, because then you're like competing against yourself. And so, they're never going to promote the e-commerce site. So that's why one of my strategies is like no-brainer 101. You have to pay salespeople regardless of the channel. So there's that. Then I've also run into salespeople who have a perception of the website our website's really hard to use,
Mm.
but have you actually used it within the last 6 months? Well, I used it 10 years ago and it was awful then. Well, things in digital change really quick, my friend. So let me show you what the website looks like today. And they're often amazed. I've run into that. So yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of reasons. Some customers are afraid that they're not going to get their pricing online. So yeah, it ranges from company to company and industry to industry.
What do you see in alignment, like just internal acceptance
Mm,
of this from kind of executive teams to different departments? We talked a little bit about sales
yeah.
there. What do you see kind of when you kind of look across the organization
Um,
in general? I know
yeah,
I'm making a general statement,
yeah,
kind of across the industry.
yeah. Everyone is looking to hit their metrics, right?
Mm.
And it's all driven by metrics, and that's how you're going to be at the end of the year. You're going to be assessed on, did you hit your metrics? Did you exceed your metrics, right? So if their metrics is simply, focused on offline activities, then there's not going to be a lot of talking back and forth. But if somehow their metrics is intertwined with what's happening in e-commerce or in your digital channel, then they're going to be a lot more interested in having conversations with you to make sure, that experience for their customers on your website is as good as possible. So to me, that's the key. There is it takes a village kind of
Mm.
mentality to drive e-commerce adoption and to get everyone bought in. And by the way, there are some companies, and I'm not sure if I can mention their names, but there are some companies out there where you can tell like everyone's bought into
Yep.
e-commerce. And some of those guys, they started really early. And where they are now, they're probably on their like fifth digital transformation, right?
Hmm.
Very early adopters. So when I look at like news that's coming from those companies, they'll print something like 70% of all of our sales now going through e-commerce.
Mm.
And you look at their competitors and it's like 30%. That's massive. That's massive.
Who
Unbelievable.
are some of those
So
companies you look up to like that?
yeah, so MSC Supply,
Mm.
their percentage of e-commerce sales is huge. Of course, the grandfather Granger, they went into e-commerce really early on. Back when I first started, I mean, they were really hyper focused on e-commerce. McMaster's has done an unbelievable job to translate those print catalogs into a digital
Yeah.
experience, right?
And
So
primarily, they
mm,
mostly built that custom too, which is incredible.
yeah, yeah, and it's crazy fast their site too.
Yeah, crazy good.
I've as it's always interesting as e-commerce people when we actually have to shop for ourselves because it's like part of you is like, okay, I need to buy this thing. But part of you is like critiquing their product detail page
Right,
or their
right.
checkout process. It's like, oh, why did they do that? Or oh, that's a good idea. Or like, oh my God, someone should be fired for doing whatever they happen to do. So yeah, those are some of the companies. I mean, I probably have more squirreled away somewhere, but those are the ones that come to mind.
Yeah, another one that's
Mm,
recent
mm,
for me, the
mm.
diving into is Sonopar.
Tonopah, absolutely.
Sonopar's building.
Yeah.
I think this is a model for customer adoption too,
Mm,
Carlos, that you
mm,
appreciate. So
mm.
Sonopar really dug into how do we help our customers do their job? Let's not
Yes,
focus on e-commerce or the
that's
catalog
it.
or traditional e-commerce things. Let's just focus on their
Right.
job. And so as they looked at their customers, they saw that their customers were,
Hmm.
they struggled managing their projects and their jobs. So they
Right.
created digital tools to help their customers manage their project. Now, of course, eventually they incorporated product. So it was easily
Mm-hmm.
to bring product into the projects, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But their first piece of adoption was
Hmm.
the stickiness, how do I help my
Yes,
customer do their job,
I
right?
love it.
And so they're building
Yeah.
tools that and I even and I I've talked about this before that
Mm.
I even have a problem with the word e-commerce in our industry. I was one
Yeah.
of the ones that at least evangelized it.
Right.
But because instead of talking about using digital tools that'll help
Yeah.
our customers do their job, we immediately jump to like what an e-commerce should look like. It should look like Amazon. It should look like Grainger. It should look
Make
like
it look like Amazon,
whoever
right?
it is. Instead of just solving for those first principles, that we should be solving for, and really, if you kind of address first principles, then you're so much better off in this versus trying to replicate something.
Yeah, that's
because the words mean something.
To me, that's why we're very fortunate to work in B2B. Because each customer is unique, right? I mean, of course, B2C, don't get me wrong, customers are unique. You have different demographics, different segments. But what you're saying is every customer, the way they run their business can be different. And so how do we adapt to them, right? You're 100% correct. The other thing that I think about is what you just said, the word e-commerce, and the debate is not so much, is it small e or big E? I'm still waiting for that. To debate.
It's small E, big C.
Is it small E? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
you're a small E camp?
That.
Okay. Good.
It's all not right, the camp. It's just the right decision.
Okay, I've heard Carlos. It from the king then I'm glad we're aligned. No, but it's if I go to a country and I say to the sales reps there or the customers, do you want e-commerce implementation? They're like, e-commerce, yeah, we don't need that. But if I say to them, do you need a self-service portal? Oh, what's a self-service portal? Well, you could go there and you could submit a support ticket and see the status of your support ticket. You can download your invoices. You could look at your spend management, what categories you're spending the most on, or who's spending the most on the products within your company. You can track and trace. They're like, yeah, we need that. So to your point, we as practitioners, we need to think more of like from the customer's perspective, what is it that they need? Isn't it Steve Jobs, right? He famously said, you start with the customer and work your way backwards. And then the stickiness will be there, right? Don't build something in a silo just because it looks cool.
Sexy and cool is not part of what we do. To talk to me, I know you've actually written an e-commerce adoption playbook. I would really like to kind of dive into that and kind of walk through how you think about adoption and the approach to it and making it better and optimizing it and even communicating it.
Yeah, and I shared it because my belief is that a rising tide lifts all boats. So even though potentially a competitor of mine may use these playbook items, and I don't think they're the end all. I mean, there's certainly a lot of other ideas out there, and some of these don't work for certain industries or different type of companies. That's okay. But the more e-commerce is, and should we keep calling it e-commerce now? I'm afraid to call it that. But the better experience we have online, the better it is for everybody, because the customer starts feeling safer and safer online. One bad experience online could jeopardize everyone's job in B2B, right? So that's why I'm sharing the playbook. And I also, by the way, I used to be a teacher in a former life, so I love teaching. I love mentoring. In a quick tangent for everyone that's listening today is get into mentorship. Find someone at a conference, a young person who's starting out their career in e-commerce. Take them under your wings, because there are a lot of bad managers out there, and B, sometimes you feel like you're all alone in a company. And you've probably been there where you're the e-commerce guy. And you feel like there's really no one to talk to, no one to bounce ideas off, especially if you're at a smaller company. To have a mentor, man, that's huge. So please do the mentorship.
Or join a B2B EA peer group.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. So go back to your question. Everything you do has to be a win-win situation. Like if you're doing something that e-commerce is winning and sales is losing or customer service is people are getting fired. That's not a win-win. So when you create a policy, you have to ask yourself, is this like a win-win? That's the most important thing, because if you get win-win policies in place, you're not shouting, at a wall, right? You're going to have buy-in from other people. You're going to have other people with skin in the game. And then, as I said, there's no silver bullet. Like you can't just do one of these things. You need to do all of them, and you have to do that. What is it? The fail fast. Is that how
Mm-hmm.
we say it in America? Yeah. By the way, English is my second language. Yeah. So
That's right.
I'm from Brazil.
Por-
Yeah.
from Brazil
Portuguese.
originally.
Yeah. I speak Portuguese and Japanese and some other languages. But
Wow.
yeah. So you have to keep trying different things. If this didn't work, okay, move on. Try something else. But create those win-win situations. Create policies that it takes a village. So if you're doing metrics, like I remember back in the day, e-commerce sales, that was my metric. You need to increase e-commerce sales, but shouldn't e-commerce sales metric be also part of the Salesforce metric? And I think so
Mm-hmm.
too. And shouldn't it be their manager's metric? Yes. And shouldn't it be the vice president of sales metric as well? Yes, yes, yes. So yeah, I mean, you have to get alignment across of all these departments and have them also measured. So in terms of like policies, to me, like the first thing is like if you have, and again, this is all going to be dependent on the company, but if you have a situation where we get a new customer and now you're working with a new customer, the customer can order through multiple channels. And you also always want to make it, allow the customer to select their channel to a certain extent, like make it easy to do business with us, or whatever channel you prefer, whether it's mobile or e-commerce, or some other format, EDI, right? That's fine. You can have policies that kind of push them towards in a nice way to e-commerce. But anyways, if you have a salesperson that's involved with that, you really need to have like an enablement person. And what I mean by that is either someone on your team or someone in the company that is in a kind of enablement or adoption type of group or title. And so they are the people who can go out to the customer's location, understand how the customer orders, their pain points, and then show them the website, show all the functionality of the website to get that adoption like right from the beginning. Now you may say that, hey, if your website is so intuitive and the UI UX is so awesome that like, why would you need those people? But you do, I really think you do need those people to start off that account in a good way, because what I often find is salespeople don't know about the website very well. And there are a lot of functions that never get taught to the customer. Or, you're getting a ton of sales from, a business over the years, but then suddenly sales drops off. What happened? And then you go there and you find out like, oh, the person that was there retired, and no one's thought about, introducing their replacement to the website and all the tools on the website. So enablement is really huge right from the get-go. If you're doing a brand new launch, okay, so this is different from like you already have e-commerce and you're just trying to get customers to shift channel. But if you're doing a brand new e-commerce launch, like you don't have e-commerce at all, you cannot do it in a silo. Like the project you're working on, you can't do it in a silo. You really need to select a group of salespeople, and they need to be on your team that's doing this release. You're working with a vendor, right? You selected the e-commerce platform. You can't work in a silo. You actually need to have those salespeople as part of the team, because they're going to be your advocates, your evangelists, and also help you to not go in the wrong direction on certain functionality. So that's huge.
They can also sync it too, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing more detrimental to an e-commerce project than the salesperson that says,
Right.
go look at our cute little website
Yeah.
for, to find the product. But when you're ready to buy from
Yeah.
me. I'll
Yeah,
give you a
yeah,
better price. Whatever the after is.
yeah. Um,
So they're both the biggest. They could be the biggest influencers
yeah,
and the biggest detractors.
absolutely, yeah. Um, what I also like are e-commerce people that go out to the field. There are too many e-commerce people who are like in a digital silo, a glass silo. You're building all these cool enhancements because you saw them on a competitor's site or you saw them at a conference, you got an idea, but like then you actually go out to the field and you see the way your customers are really ordering and what their real pain points are. But also you build empathy with the sales team. Like you understand like how they
Hmm.
struggle and what their pain points are and what's important for them. So field visits are like really, really key. Let's see, we talked about metrics, in terms of getting the right alignment, so everyone from the CEO down to the lowest person should have e-commerce as a component of their metric,
Compensation.
yeah, compensation. That's really
Hmm.
important. The continuous feedback.
That's a very,
Hmm,
but to kind of push on that,
yeah, go ahead.
that's a very strategic. That means
Hmm,
if that's happening, if the CEO and the executive team and everybody
hmm,
else in the organization is comped on how
hmm.
well e-commerce does, which is the best form of
Yeah,
adoption is starting that evangel is actually,
absolutely.
but it also means that 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 team actually understands this is a strategic initiative.
You're not fighting the battle from the bottom and
Yeah.
trying to fight it up, upwards. It's coming from the very highest levels. Like this is a enterprise strategic
Hmm.
part of our success is to have e-commerce adoption. Uh, and yeah, absolutely. I think the continuous feedback as well. I think so. What I mean by that is a lot of companies get this wrong. They spend all this money to look for an e-commerce platform, the magic e-commerce platform that will change everything. They build it, they release it, usually late. They release it, and then they're done. 10 years goes by. Oh, customers are telling us we need to improve our e-commerce platform. So they do it again, another big bang. That's a huge mistake. Once you
Mm.
release it, it's never ending. So you now need to shift your thinking into continuous improvement, and you need to be able to fund that continuous improvement because the feedback is going to be coming back from the customers in the field sales all the time. And if you just build it and walk away, like if I build it, they will come. They'll come for a short time, but then they'll stop coming. So that continuous feedback, talking to the customer, getting the voice of the customer, having the opportunity for them to have focus groups with you, going out to the field, sitting down with the field, having them part of, how you determine what your backlog is going to be. To me, that's why I love B2B because we're just constantly, and you're doing this in B2C, but again, different challenges for every customer is you know always making it in a better experience as much as possible.
What you're saying is it's a program, not a project. It's a
Ah,
department,
yes,
not a
that's right.
project, right?
That's
There's no
right. Yeah.
start date, no
Beautiful.
stop date. I
Beautifully
think there's
said.
a
Yeah.
couple components within that too. Like
Mm,
product content never stops.
correct.
Search improvement never stops. Like
Never.
UX improvement never stops.
Hmm.
That feedback with customers, like you said, never stops.
Right.
And that's got to have a department or a program to be able to work its way through and
Yeah.
prioritize and then be executed on.
Yeah. Because
That's such
I
a
mean,
good
you
point.
can tell like a company will release their e-commerce platform and the front page never changes. It's
Hmm.
just like it becomes stale. And you can't do that. You can't sit back. And so when you build and you invest in e-commerce, you have to understand, to your point, it's not just a one-time investment. Like I
Mm.
need to have a team in here in place, someone who's going to be doing my analytics to to tell me, how are the customers really using the website, and telling us what's winning and what's not. Someone to be driving the merchandising on the site, someone to be driving the product information on the site, someone that's doing the things that requires improvements in the ERP API so that we can start showing lead time, or we can start showing true available to promise, and those other things that customers are often asking about. Yeah, so you need to set it up for success, and it is a program, very much so.
Just switching channels a little bit
Okay.
fast here. Who do you learn from out there?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have my go-to people who I know that they know what they're talking about. But before I get into that, realize that in B2B, you're not out to copy Amazon. Again, going back to your original comment not too long ago, was that start with the customer, work backwards. And your customer should be the person that you listen to more than anyone. So keep that in mind, that what applies to one does not apply to all. But well, first of all, let me say I follow you, and I think I've been lurking in your various channels, and as you move from company to company, I've always followed you on LinkedIn, and I've always highly respected you. So let's get that right off. Yeah. We're from the same generation. We've been in e-commerce for 25 years or so, and we both share a passion for e-commerce. We both love e-commerce, right? So definitely yourself, of course, the B2B master duo, dynamic duo of Andy, who used to work for Deloitte. I mentioned he wrote the Death of the B2B Salesperson.
Forrester.
Yeah, famous article. Brian Beck, whose book is up on my bookshelf amongst many other e-commerce books. Brian Beck, fantastic guy. The B2B master guys really know their stuff. Highly respect them. Isaiah over at Trellis, he's always has some insightful things to talk about. Jason, is it Greenwood? Did
Jason
I get his
Greenwood?
last? Yeah, his last name. Right. Yeah. He knows his stuff for sure. Highly respect him as well. Let's see. There's one or two guys I also follow online whose name escapes me for the moment, but I follow them. I think if you're going to the B2B e-commerce events like B2B Online or the B2B Association's Future Conference, you start noticing that some people are speaking at another level. And pretty soon you're going to start paying a lot of attention to them, but also making those good connections. So when you do have a question, like, how should I handle this? You can have like a good support group to go to talk about, like, what have you done in your past around this, right?
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Carlos, how would you prefer people reach out to you and connect with you?
Don't be a stranger in any of the events. I'm not hard to miss. Walking around, come up to me.
Carlos has got a large entourage.
Only when there's dancing involved, perhaps. Yeah. No, definitely come up to me during the conferences. I love having conversations. In fact, that is how I met one of my mentees, was just that, right? We started talking during the conference, and I said, you've got a lot of questions and I've got a flight to hit, which I missed. But since then, every month we get together and I learn from her as well. So do it that way. Certainly on LinkedIn, definitely at the B2B Association's conference coming this fall. Let's connect. Again, like I'm pretty transparent person. Obviously I'm not able to talk about the things I'm working on at this moment. And there's a lot of things I'm working on, but things that I've worked on in my past that's worked well or hasn't worked well, I'm keen to share that. And go to LinkedIn and read my articles and comment on my articles. I love getting comments. That's awesome.
I don't think there's any other practitioners that are writing more in-depth work, and maybe kind of across the board,
Mm.
not even limited to practitioners, than the things that you do. Your LinkedIn is on my notify all, which means I get
Thank you.
everything that you do, and which really means I'm just reading it on a regular basis, from your comments to your articles.
Well, thanks.
This is just amazing to have you here. There's so many things,
Yeah.
Carlos.
Yeah.
There's so many second questions that I want to ask you next time. So let's
Yeah,
definitely do that
let's get
again.
together again, and hopefully the next article that I publish, it's going to be on the topic of A2A commerce, e-commerce.
A2A, what's that?
Well, we have B2B, but in my opinion, we're heading to A to A, or the other phrase I'm kind of coining is e-commerce 3.0, because right now we're at e-commerce 2.5. E-commerce
In B2B, we're
3.0.
at like 1.5.
B2B. You think?
Yeah.
Well, I lay out the case that we're at 2.5, and you'll see why in my article. But
Okay, I can't wait for
yeah,
that.
yeah. So it's going to be all about A to A. So you can probably guess what the A stands for. Everyone's talking about it.
Let's leave it. Let's
Yeah.
leave a cliffhanger for everyone.